And gentlemen, here we are again in our third meeting, in our third session for the introduction to American literature. Today we are supposed to discuss, the third part of the American literature, as we said, in lecture number 1 in our first class. I told you that, we are going to divide, this course, or the discussion of this course, American literature, into 6 parts. We started, last time with the colonial period, and today we start with the second period, our second part of this course, اللي هو الرومانticism. Romanticism, let's say, generally speaking, before we get into the movement as an American movement, in generally speaking, it's a movement and it's an era or a period, an artistic period or artistic era or an artistic, movement, sort of a literary movement, an intellectual one, okay? It was, started in Europe, particularly or specifically in France, in the, let's say, towards the end of the 18th century. And, that movement, started as sort of a reaction to the Industrial Revolution, okay? And it was also sort of a revolt, sort of a revolution against the aristocratic, social and political norms, traditions, customs, and of the age of the Enlightenment. And this movement was also a reaction against the scientific rationalization of nature. Okay, so this is, generally speaking, about what Romanticism is. Okay, then we come into the movement as it is, in the United States, and as other movements, most of the other literary movements in the United States, they are Romanticism, just like most of the others, sort of an extension or an influence of European movements. So Romanticism is, as it is, as I've just said, started in Europe, in France, and this movement reached America in the early 19th century through European influence. European Romantic movement reached America in the early 19th century, and American Romanticism is a multifaceted and individualistic as it was in Europe. So it was just almost exactly the same as it was in Europe. It is multifaceted, which means of different surfaces. It doesn't have just one perfect, one exact surface. It's of different surfaces, different dimensions, and concerned with individual, with the person, with the human being. Okay, it's just like Europeans. The Americans, Romantics, demonstrated high level of moral enthusiasm, commitment to individualism, and the unfolding of the self, and emphasis on intuitive perception. Okay, this is sort of, let's say, the theme or the message of the Romanticism in the United States or in America. So it demonstrated high level of moral enthusiasm, commitment to individualism, and the unfolding of the self. To take care of the self, or to trust one's self. Okay, to discover one's self. Okay, and emphasis on intuitive perception. Okay, to put emphasis on the perceptions, the feelings, the instinct feelings of the human being, of the individual, and the assumption of that the word, this is Romanticism. Another theme, the assumption that the natural world was inherently good, while the human society was filled with corruption. Okay, this is what they believe in Romanticism. And next page, as you see, to about, you know, Romanticism became popular in the American politics, philosophy, and art, in these different fields of study. Okay, it was, you know, I mean, these politics, philosophy, and art were all were all affected by Romanticism, and they also had Romanticism in their writing. The movement, the Romanticism, appealed to the revolutionary spirit of America as well as to those longing to break free of the strict religious traditions of early settlement. The Romantics rejected rationalism and religious intellect. This is again sort of repeating what is said before with some new themes here. You know, Romantics. You know, this is their theme. They rejected, you know, rationalism and religious intellect. They were against rationalism, يعني using reason and rationale and religious intellect, religious explanations and, you know, justifications for let's say matters of lives or the affairs of daily life of people, you know, in a society. It appealed, you know, Romanticism, it appealed to those in opposition of Calvinism, which includes the belief that the destiny of each individual is preoccupied. Okay? Okay, as also here said, it appealed to those in opposition of Calvinism. Okay, Calvinism believes in what؟ اللي هو بيسموها اللي هي القدرية، أو بمعنى إنه الإنسان قدره مسبق، يعني مكتوب له مسبق. Okay, which includes the belief that the destiny of each individual is preoccupied. The Romantic movement gave rise to New England اللي هو transcendentalism. Okay, Transcendentalism. Okay, it's a bit difficult word. Transcendentalism. Transcendentalism is also another movement that started in the United States. And transcendental means, you know, being superior, being above all, or above others, or being beyond. Okay, beyond, you know, beyond common or ordinary thinking. Transcendentalism. Okay, this is another movement started in the United States and portrayed or pictured what? Portrayed a less restrictive relationship between God and universe. The new philosophy presented the individual with a more personal relationship with God. Transcendentalism. Okay, Transcendentalism and Romanticism appealed to Americans in a similar fashion for both a privileged feeling over reason, individual freedom of expression over the restraints of tradition and custom. It often involved a rapturous response to nature. It encouraged the rejection of harsh, rigid Calvinism and promised a new blossoming of American culture. That is Romanticism. Okay. It was against, you know, this rigid Calvinism. Okay, that is much related or connected to the religious beliefs and religious justifications of human affairs. Okay. Then next we come to again going on with American Romanticism and, you know, their beliefs and their themes. American Romanticism embraced, you know, the individual and rebelled against the confinement of a new classicism and religious tradition. Just sort of also repetition of the theme of American Romanticism as being, you know, against the confinement, the restrictions, okay, of new classicism, اللي هو this movement اللي هي الحركة الكلاسيكية الحديثة, and religious tradition against also religious, you know, traditions, rules, restrictions. Okay, that you know what makes, you know, Romanticism as a different movement, because it came to be against, you know, new classicism and the new Calvinism, against Calvinism, against religious tradition. The Romantic movement in America created a newly literary genre that continues to influence American writers. Okay, the Romantic movement has its effect on American writers in what they wrote in novels, short stories, and poems. Okay, these were replaced. And poems replaced the sermons and manifestos of yore. American writers being affected by Romanticism, their poems replaced the sermons and manifestos of yore, not talking anymore, dealing or having a lot of religious sermons and religious teachings and religious, let's say, accounts and stories, and teachings in their writings. Okay, and even talking about the old days, the manifestos of yore. Okay, اللي هو details about the old days, about the past, because Romanticism was against all of this. Romantic literature was personal. Look at this. This is important. Romantic literature was personal, intense, and portrayed more emotion than ever seen in new classical literature. Okay, this is important as a feature of Romanticism. Okay, it was personal. Romantic literature was personal, intense, and portrayed more emotion than ever seen in a new classical literature. America's preoccupation with freedom became a great source of motivation for Romantic writers, as many were delighted in free expression and emotion without so much fear of ridicule and controversy. Okay, in the States, having by the time, in the 19th century and on, the people in the States, they were having more and more freedom, and that was, for the benefit of the Romantics, or the Romantic writers, because they had the freedom, okay, to write, about their own feelings, their own emotions. They could express freely what they believe in and what they think about, without being afraid of being ridiculed or criticized, or being let's say criticized, or someone to talk against them. Okay, they were not afraid of that because of the freedom that took place in the United States. They put Romantics. This is important too. They put more effort into the psychological development of their characters in their writings. And the main characters typically displayed extremes of sensitivity and excitement. This is the type of characters that, the Romantic writers, had. Their type of characters, they put more effort into the psychological development of the characters, and the main characters typically displayed extreme. They showed extreme, a lot of sensitivity, being very let's say sensitive in their feelings, and excitement. Okay. Next page we have also here, this is very important, and again talking about features, themes of Romanticism. Okay, this page is important, all of it is important. Says the works of Romantic era also was different from preceding works in that they what? Okay, that could be sort of a question. How was, Romanticism, our Romantic works, our Romantic era, works of Romantic era, different from preceding works, from previous works of literature? So they were different. The works of Romantics, of the Romantic era, different in that what? In that they spoke to wider audience, okay, يعني to more people than before, not to specific people or to specific type of people or to a certain class or to a certain audience. No, the audience of the Romantics was wider, okay, and larger in size. Okay, this is one thing. They spoke to a wider audience, partly reflecting the greater distribution of books as costs came down during the period. And you know what helped them to talk to a wider audience was, you know, the cost of printing books and distributing books, you know, came down, you know, when they started, because of, you know, the development and the advance that took place in technology, in printing and in, you know, distributing, you know, books. The Romantic period saw, again, another thing, the Romantic period saw an increase in female authors and also female readers. This is also important, and that also makes Romantic era, the Romantic period, different from previous, you know, eras or periods. Why? Because it witnessed, you know, the increase in number of, you know, female authors, women authors, and female readers. That wasn't, you know, in terms of number, okay, known or available before. So we had more female authors and more female readers during the Romantic era, during the Romantic period. يعني. Here we come to important also part of this lecture, اللي هو talking about or having examples of important literary figures of this period. And one of the most important, you know, figures هو عندنا Poe and Emerson and Hawthorne. Okay, Edgar Allan Poe and Emerson and Hawthorne, they are near perfect representations for Romanticism. So these names to be remembered very well. Okay? These names to be remembered very well. Okay? So we have Poe, Emerson, and Hawthorne as the perfect representations of Romanticism. Here, example of one of them, اللي هو Edgar Allan Poe. Talk about Edgar Allan Poe's poetry. Has that happy, the type of poetry that he wrote. Okay, it was, you know, type of happy, lyrical, and metrical verse, metrical poetry. Poe's poetry was happy, lyrical, يعني musical, and metrical verse with a meter. Okay, that follows a meter, because there are different meters in poetry in English. Okay, is it iambic pentameter, tetrameter? Okay, his subject, اللي هو Edgar Allan Poe's subject, his subjects may be gloomy, but his poems contain sentimentality, يعني feelings, and supernatural characteristics, يعني supernatural characteristics يعني supernatural characteristics, and are about exploring the human psyche. Okay, the human psyche. For example, here an example of Edgar Allan Poe's poetry, a poem that is called The Raven. Okay, raven is a kind of bird, you know. Okay, it's a black kind of bird, and this poem is entitled with this name. Okay, The Raven. What is it about? Here is sort of a summary of this poem. The Raven is about a sleepless narrator who is absolutely haunted, يعني مسحور أو مسكون به, haunted by a raven. Okay. This man is mourning. Okay, this man is mourning the death of his lost Lenore, and is very melancholy, very sad. This man who is haunted by the raven is absolutely haunted by the raven. He's mourning the death of Lenore, and is very melancholy, very sad. The raven shows up and makes his perch, okay, his perch, and will not leave. The raven, when the raven shows up, يعني appeared to this man, okay, to the speaker in this poem, and he makes his perch, يعني his stop, or his landing, or his, where he stopped, okay, محل ما هبط, his perch, and will not leave. He didn't want to leave this bird, the raven. The man asks questions about grief, but the raven will only answer, nevermore, nevermore, always asking. This event would never occur in real life. Okay, of course, he is supernatural, لأنه مكتوب الكاركترستكس تبع اللي هو pose poetry, pose verse. One of his characteristics is what, اللي هو supernatural characteristics in his poetry. His poetry is supernatural, so he talks about things that sometimes could not happen in the real world. So this poem is, this event would never occur in real life, which makes the poem romantic, okay? Because it doesn't, so such an event doesn't happen in the real life, so that makes it romantic. The poem also is about exploring the depths of this man's grief, man's sadness. Similarly, Emerson is also romantic. Actually, he is transcendental. He is romantic and he is also transcendental. Okay, and قلنا transcendental يعني اللي هو related to transcendentalism، اللي هي الموفمنت اللي that is called في العربي هم المتعالين أو الفوقيين، okay، أو اللي هم السوبيريور، people who think of themselves or they write about superior things or they are superior. Transcendentalism، okay، اللي هي الفلسفة المتعالية، okay. And that this one started in the United States, okay. This is also an important or well-known movement. اللي هو transcendentalism is an important movement, literary movement, started in the United States. But then Emerson is romantic, but he is also transcendental. But this can be seen as an offshoot of Romanticism. So this is an example by from Edgar Allan Poe's poetry, and about the raven. This poem is not used, for discussion this semester or for this course. For one reason, it's a beautiful one, but it's not put for discussion in the course for at least one reason, because it's really too long. It's a very long poem. So I looked for other examples and samples of different movements, but I selected short ones so that we can have a better idea about a whole poem from the beginning to the end. So, but the raven is an important example of Poe's poetry and verse, as also being one of the perfect representations of Romanticism as a Romantist. Okay, and remember this the raven and this poem is important at least for also the first or some of the topics for discussion or quizzes, and will also be included things about it. Okay, basic things about this poem might be included also in the exams. And, next is talking about اللي هو self reliance. Okay, اللي هو ايش self reliance? We talk about trusting oneself. Trusting oneself. Here Emerson espouses, he believes, he adapts, okay, he supports the ideas of transcendentalism. Okay, اللي هو قلنا اللي هي this type of movement اللي هو literary movement اللي هي الفلسفة اللي يسموها الفلسفة المتعالية. Okay, he espouses, he adapts, he believes, he supports, okay, he advocates the ideas of transcendentalism. He tells اللي هو Emerson, he tells readers, he tells the reader things like the importance of trusting oneself, اللي هو self-reliance, in his self-reliance, and that we do not know everything by knowledge. اللي هو in self-reliance, اللي هو in his book, okay, in his work, self-reliance, اللي هو trusting oneself, here being transcendentalism or a transcendentalist, okay, he tells the reader things like what? The importance of trusting oneself, and that we do not know everything by knowledge. Not everything that is known by knowledge. Knowledge is not everything يعني to know through. There are things that you can learn and know not only through knowledge. Okay, you can know through, here as it is said here, through experience, through your experience or experience of the others, through experimental, through experiments, of someone, okay, or of self experience, the first hand experience, okay, or through, let's say, you learn things through experience. Some things are learned through experience, okay, not there are things that can be learned through knowledge, yes, no problem, but not everything, because there are things that can be learned also through experience and through experiments. The philosophy makes sense, but is not out there enough for it to be hard to incorporate into everyday life. Okay, that is transcendentalism. Discussing abstract ideas without translation to real life is romantic as well. Okay? Discussing abstract ideas without translation to real life is also romantic. Okay? Is also romantic. In his poem, Give All to Love, okay, اللي هو Emerson, in his poem, this is also another example to be remembered. The title and the summary, and of course the author. He also talks of importance of trusting oneself and giving oneself over to the divine power of love. In Hawthorne's short stories, this is, as we said, another example of a romantic writer. Okay. Hawthorne's short stories, okay, these abstract qualities take a symbolic meaning. Okay, abstract qualities will abstract topics. Okay, here we talk about what we call اللي هم الأفكار أو المصطلحات اللي هي المطلقة. okay, الأمور المطلقة زي مثلا الحب، الكراهية، الموت، الحياة، الصداقة. Okay, we talk about these abstract qualities. Okay, abstract, terms. Take on a symbolic meaning. في مثلا Hawthorne's short story هي The Birthmark. Sorry, in The Birthmark اللي هو Elimar was so involved in achieving perfection that he ended up killing his wife in the process. Okay, here in The Birthmark of Hawthorne's, to about Elimar as one of the characters, achieving perfection, that he ended up killing his wife in the process. In achieving perfection, he killed his wife. As Virtual Mentor says, nature is romantic. Nature in romantic literature is moral. It bears symbolic meaning, and humans who challenge it with inadequate respect for the immanent power of the divine generally learn lessons in humility. That is, example of one of Hawthorne's short stories, The Birthmark. These are also to be remembered. Next, and that is before the last, اللي هو examples or more examples of literary figures of this period, okay? Famous names with, of course, some of their names. Of course, some of the names have already been mentioned in previous slides. So who are they again? Who are these romantic people? Who are these romanticists? Okay, so who are these romanticism writers? First of all, they were diverse, but this is important here as a definition of the romantic writers or writers of romanticism. First of all, they were a diverse group of individuals varying from different backgrounds and styles. But one thing that they had in common was that they were all individualistic-minded writers. So this is how you define a romantic writer, or romantic writers, or romanticism writers. So they are a group of people who are writers who were different from other writers, okay, because of their different backgrounds and styles, okay. But they have one thing that they had in common. These writers, they have one thing in common. That was they were all individualistic. Okay, being individual, taking care of the individual, him or herself. Okay, اللي بيسموها في العربي الفردانية. Okay, اللي هو believing in the person, the individual. Okay. Minded writers. Here is a list of authors below with their major works and importance. Okay. طبعا these are all important. Okay. Say number one اللي هو Nathaniel Hawthorne. Okay. We have just mentioned this name. Nathaniel Hawthorne. Okay. One of the famous romantic writers, famous in writing short stories, and there are masterpieces in English literature in general and in American literature in particular. اللي هو في عنا examples of his short stories اللي هو Young Goodman Brown, The Scarlet Letter, The House of Green Gables. Okay. The Edgar Allan Poe, okay, narrative of Arthur Gordon Rhyme, okay, this is one of his short stories, and then A Telltale Heart, which is going to be covered this semester. This is also a very famous short story. The Raven is a poem we have just already talked about. Inventor, this is important about Edgar Allan Poe, inventor of the American short story, known for his Gothic writing. Gothic writing is a type of writing اللي بيسموه بالعربي القوطي أو القوطي اللي هو related to a group of people in Europe. Okay, it's a type of writing, and viewed the countryside as a phantasm. Okay, as a phantasm or illusionary. Okay, imaginary, mental image. Then. No, not the last. There are some more on the next page. We have Washington Irving. Washington Irving is also another important figure to be remembered. Rip Van Winkle, Sleepy Hollow is هو هذا Washington Irving. هذا مهم جدا to be remembered. Okay, this is important. Is the father of American literature. Saw the country as an escape from city life. Country means, the rural area outside the city. Okay, the agricultural area أو part of the country أو outside the city. Okay, اللي هي المناطق الريفية اللي خارج المدينة, the country side. Okay, she is the father of American literature. He saw the country as an escape from the city life and fought for copyright infringement laws for authors. For the copyright, for infringement, okay, infringement laws, infringement laws له ايش اللي هو الانتهاك او اللي هو انتهاك قوانين النشر والكتابة. okay, infringement, اللي هو breaking or violating the law of copywriting. Okay, this is Washington Irving. This is Washington Irving. Some other important, all of these on this page are very important literary figures to be remembered, names and, some, at least one or two of their, works. You have to remember these names with their works. Then we come to the next page, and is the last one for this, lecture. We have Walt Whitman or Walt Whitman, the controversial Leaves of Grass, his work Leaves of Grass. بعدين Franklin Evans, one of the bridge poets between American Romanticism and the 20th century. Okay, هذا an important figure to be remembered. Okay, Walt Whitman as considered to be one of the bridge poets between American Romanticism and the 20th century. Then next we have also Henry David Thoreau. Thoreau is also an important name in American literature, also to be remembered. Here we have Civil Disobedience. He was a practical transcendentalist. We have Harriet Beecher Stowe. في عنا his works اللي هو Uncle Tom's Cabin. بعدين كمان The Little Lady Who Started the Civil War. وإيش Stowe في عنا kept European nations from aiding the South in the Civil War. Next we have James Fenimore Cooper. His work is The Last of Mohicans, and we mentioned this before in the first lecture. Cooper, The Last of the Mohicans أو The Last of the Mohicans, اللي هو قلنا الموهيكانز أو الموهيجانز بالجي, اللي هو one of the Indian tribes or one of the Native American tribes, lived in the United States before being occupied by the settlers. He was the father. This remembered. Okay, هذا مهم. Okay, this is also important. He was the father of the American novel. Okay, the name and what he was famous for. He was the father of the American novel. Last, which is also very important and mentioned before, اللي هو Emily Dickinson. Emily Dickinson is a she writer, is a female writer, a woman. We have, Is My Verse Alive? Okay, this is one of her works. She is what? One of the bridge poets between American Romanticism and the 20th century, just like number one on the same page, on the same slide, Walt Whitman. Okay, he is considered to be also the same as one of the romantic poets, or a bridge between the American Romanticism and the 20th century. Okay, please pay attention to the names and the works of these names, of these literary figures, because they will be important in the final exam. And that's all for today. We call it a class. Please, if you have any questions, you contact me through my email or you call my telephone number. Thank you very much, and see you again very soon. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.